Have you ever wondered how drug cartels, politicians, and even countries launder money? Well, today we're looking at the biggest money laundering scandals in history. And to give this some context, the world of financial crime is estimated to be worth over $1.6 trillion. That's about 3% of the world's global GDP. So let us see if we can make a dent in that number by exposing some of these criminals. Politicians aren't known for their extravagant spending, but some get pretty cozy when given the opportunity. Take, for example, the former president of the Philippines, Ferdinand Marcos. After he was ousted from power in 1986, it was discovered that he and his family had stashed away an estimated $5 to $10 billion in Swiss banks. It is important to note that this was during the time when there were no official requirements for reporting large international transfers. This made it much easier for the Marcos family to move their money around without drawing attention to themselves. The family had used a combination of shell companies, false declarations, and bribed officials to hide the extent of their wealth. Once the Marcos family left the Philippines, they used their ill-gotten gains to buy luxury properties, works of art, and other assets all over the world. They also invested heavily in the stock market, which helped them to further launder their money and grow their wealth. To date, the family has been ordered to pay over $350 million in damages to the Philippine government. However, only a small fraction of this has actually been recovered. Now let's look at a more recent example. 1MDB scandal in Malaysia. Over a period of 7 years, billions of dollars flowed out of a Malaysian state fund called 1MDB. The fund was set up by Prime Minister Najib Razak to help develop the country's economy. But instead of using the money for its intended purpose, it was funneled into the pockets of politically connected individuals, including Razak himself. The scandal came to light in 2015 when the Wall Street Journal published a series of articles detailing the suspicious activities at 1MDB. Since then, several high-ranking officials have been arrested and charged in connection with the scandal. In 2018, the Malaysian government seized over $1 billion in cash and assets from those involved. While this is just a small fraction of the money that was stolen, it's still one of the largest financial scandals in history. But what about when entire countries are involved in money laundering? In 2014, the United Nations released a report that estimated that over $800 billion was laundered through banks in Russia each year. The report suggested that Russian banks were deliberately turning a blind eye to suspicious transactions in order to avoid detection. This was part of a larger problem in Eastern Europe, where banks were often owned by organized crime groups. As a result, they were able to easily launder money and move it around the world. The situation was so bad that the United States took action by imposing sanctions on Russian banks. This helped to put pressure on the banks to improve their anti-money laundering practices. However, it's unclear if anything has changed since then. Laundering money isn't just the domain of criminals or corrupt politicians. Even major corporations have been caught engaging in the practice. Take, for example, HSBC Holdings. In 2012, the bank was fined $1.9 billion by U.S. authorities for failing to prevent drug cartels from laundering money through its accounts. The bank was accused of turning a blind eye to suspicious transactions involving Mexican drug cartels. This allowed the cartels to move their money around the world and avoid detection. HSBC eventually agreed to plead guilty to the charges against it and pay the fine. This was one of the largest anti-money laundering penalties ever imposed at the time. But it wasn't enough to deter other banks from following in HSBC's footsteps. In 2017, Deutsche Bank was fined $7.2 billion by U.S. authorities for similar reasons. The bank was accused of allowing Russian customers to launder money and evade sanctions. This was the largest fine ever imposed by the U.S. Treasury Department for violating sanctions. These cases show that money laundering is a serious issue that affects not only individuals and corrupt politicians, but also major financial institutions, banks, and other financial institutions. must take steps to prevent money laundering and ensure that they are complying with anti-money laundering regulations. Otherwise, they could face severe penalties like these banks did. Well, there you have it, some of the biggest money laundering scandals in history. From corrupt politicians to major corporations, these cases show that money laundering is a serious issue that affects everyone. Now it's your turn. Which of these money laundering scandals was the most surprising to you? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to learn more about financial crime, check out our other videos on the topic. See you next time.